All right, we're live. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our 7th My Ocean story. We are so happy to have Nicolas Winkler here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. Nick is a freediver, mixed air rebreather, photographer, ocean journalist, conservationist, and a podcast director. Actually, here's his podcast here. Dive in the podcast and his website, nicolaswinkler.com. This multifaceted ocean hero is here to tell us his ocean story today. Thank you so much for being here, Nick.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So I guess we can jump right in. Our first question is, what does the ocean mean to you?
I've been struggling with the answer to that question since you sent it to me, and I feel that a lot of people that probably have worked in the ocean space or are connected to it probably, or maybe I don't want to single out anybody, but I struggle to answer that because it's such a broad. What does it mean? It sort of influences almost every part of my life since a fairly early childhood. And pretty much every decision I've sort of made in recent years, whether it's where I choose to live or the work I choose to follow, has sort of always sort of followed water, and specifically the ocean. So it in a big way it forms an identity for me, and it's, if somebody reads my bio on my website, I was born in landlocked Switzerland, right? So I have technically no business like being close to the ocean as a child. And I've moved around a lot, and that sort of brings in itself sort of like questions of where you belong, right? Whether that's through language, culture, geography, like as in different places. So having moved around so much, you sort of lose a sense of that identity, and the ocean kind of gives you a lot of that.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, it's a place you can always connect to, right? It's if there's one constant, it's change, but it's also that the oceans is somewhere to be found.
Yeah, it becomes a part of your identity when you base your life around it. That's 100%. Yeah.
So what attracts you from the ocean?
What attracts me to the ocean? Wow. That's another big question. I think it's been a place that I've escaped to, whether it's in my childhood, sort of escape from things that have happened in life or certain people in life. It's I remember, when I would go to the beach as a child growing up. So I grew up in an island called Grenada in the southern Caribbean. Moved there when I was about 9, and every time we'd be at the beach, other kids would build sandcastles or play near the water, but I would immediately go snorkeling, try to hold my breath and see how far I could go and stuff like that. And there came a point where I would go to the beach and people would go like, ask my mom, like, where's your son? I was like, oh, he's like over there, and people like, can't see him because it'd be way in the distance. So it's been an escape, and a place of discovery. That there's always that excitement that you're gonna find something new, and for me, it's usually a different animal or a different behavior to look at, or finding something of interest. But it's also been a place of healing, especially in the last few years. Yeah.
Right.
So how does that flow into your daily life and mission?
I think, like I mentioned earlier, it's affected pretty much every decision I've made, right? I went to school to study marine biology, even though initially I'd been sent to do an apprenticeship in machining, because I'm fairly good at building things and doing things with my hands. But I just didn't find any joy at working at a lathe in a factory, 8 hours at a time. So I fairly early on, after my first year in the apprenticeship, that I'd been sent back to Switzerland to do that in my late teens after high school. And all of a sudden I'm back in this landlocked country, in the center of a landlocked country working in a factory, and it's like, no, this is not interesting. So I went, I decided I wanted to go back to Grenada, and in all fairness, I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? I'd learned to dive in high school, and so I went back and I spent a summer diving, and I'd found out that the university there had a marine biology program that they were just starting off, and enrolled in that pretty quickly. I didn't really know what it was. in all fairness, it had something to do with the ocean.
Yeah.
It would keep me on the island. It would sort of keep me, connected to that, and pretty much everything afterwards has been a decision to stay connected. I've spent most of my life diving, so most, like the joke is with friends is like if I go back to the Caribbean and visit, people go like, we don't see you. It's like, yeah, well, I'm around, but I'm diving.
Yes.
Most of my time is on the water, and in recent years, I've sort of pivoted back and forth. Over the last decade, it's been a time of personal challenge. That's where sort of the healing part came in, and every decision has been sort of, well, I want to do this around the ocean, so I want to do that, and it wasn't until about 2 years ago that I sort of decided I would sort of did a bit of soul searching and decided, all these skills that I have, how can I best use them without either ignoring one of these skills or these passions, and being able to combine them, and sort of doing underwater photography or ocean-based photography seemed to be the most logical thing. I have a degree in marine biology. I have a degree in sort of marine management, so I understand the issues from a science and a social perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I also did a degree in international development, so I sort of also understand what these issues mean to people beyond policy, right? Especially in a developed world context and developing world context. And my skills as a diver over the last 20 plus years, you tend to build a bit of skill and a bit of knowledge and a bit of experience in the water, and whether that's using technical gear or as a freediver. You build that up, and over the years I've always had a camera in hand, and it just kind of made a lot of sense.
Cool. So what brought you to Halifax?
It's a long story, but everything in my life seems to be a really long story, convoluted. But the long and short of it is I went to Dalhousie University to study marine management.
Okay. Yeah, the marine management program, the
Correct,
Masters of Marine Management.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I did Ceres, so it was very similar.
Yeah, I took some classes in Ceres, with a couple of the faculty there.
Yeah, very, very exciting realm to be in, the marine management or natural management at Dal. Very, very cool programs. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So I guess.
Sorry, I would like to ask something additional.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Go for it.
I'm thinking, like, how do you apply all that knowledge for the benefit of the ocean? Like, why do you think it's useful? Because I clearly see why is it useful, but maybe some people don't. So I would love if you can tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think there's I guess in a sense there's like the dichotomy of the personal endeavor of what you're trying to accomplish, and then the reality of how you accomplish that. So about 2 years ago, I decided to sort of focus on photography as a medium, as a way to sort of express issues, and sort of be able to use that as a platform to sort of bring what is, for a lot of people, either unfamiliar or issues that are often far out of sight or out of mind. And, as a mission statement or as an idea, that's fairly easy. It's easy to do, to come up with an idea, right? And then you go like, well, okay, now I got to start a business and I got to think about the practical things. And at some point, you got to figure out how to make a living from it, right? So it's easy to say I want to go out and save the oceans, or I want to, train dolphins, as many young new marine biologists might say, but there's a reality to life. So it's, for me, it's been trying to find projects that have meaning, and to be perfectly fair, in this world, of COVID, it's, you kind of take the work that you can get. But having said that, I've been fortunate enough to work on a couple of projects that have dealt with ocean science communication, or document science in action or research. I've been fortunate enough to take part in collaborating in creating a media package for awareness campaigns and things like that. So I am finding like avenues to put that work to use, and sort of to answer your question, it's the skill set that I have allows me to be in the water, to be comfortable in the water, and to sort of use my knowledge so the experience comes on the diving side. The knowledge comes from the science, and I've done turtle conservation work. I've done policy work, and sort of how does one tell a story? How do you, it's easy to take a photo, but then how do you try to take an image that then tries to tell a story? And in all fairness, I'm still learning to do that. But the idea is to try to apply that, combine these things and these skills in order to be able to express that, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
I was actually wondering, so freediving is still a big part of your life, and you have this podcast, Dive In, the podcast, which is about freediving and rebreathing diving, I guess, kind of both, right?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if like your ocean conservation side of your passion, like if that comes into the podcast and comes into your freediving, like if those two sides of your life ever meet.
I think on a personal level, I sort of see them one and the same. So me spending time in the ocean for me is always sort of a further expression of what I'm either trying to learn from the ocean or things I can witness and experience, and then maybe even tell a story about. I started off as a scuba diver, and growing up in a small island, technical diving wasn't available. It's also a very costly endeavor, so that didn't come till later. So the freediving came first for me. And eventually build the technical side of the experience. And the podcast it's a passion project, right? I do it with three other people. It's every week, and we get to talk about diving. And as part of that podcast, I run a segment called Think Blue, where I talk about ocean issues. It sort of rotates every few weeks. So that's my little way to inject that. And we do cover like news items as well. And often we try to pick items that also deal with ocean issues as well. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
You shared with us some photos, and I'd hate to like go through this talk without showing them, as you are a really amazing photographer. Do you want to I can share my screen and you can speak to some of these photos?
Yeah. Oh, there we go. I guess I can slide these myself. So, probably the first thing I did when I left university, having done marine biology and a degree in development, I went back to the Caribbean, and I thought, I'm going to save the world now, in my naive younger mind. And I ended up working at a dive shop for a few months because that was the sure thing that I knew how to do. And then I came across, I was actually in the process of trying to set up my own NGO, and then somebody was stepping out of an NGO that was actually dealing with leatherback turtles primarily, which you see here on screen. And that's a photo taken on the very north tip of Grenada, in the southern Caribbean. It's a beach that's about 700 meters long, and I mean, obviously local people knew that turtles were there for a long time, and people would harvest the eggs and the meat from the turtles. That's been something that's been practiced for a long time. And when people started researching it, it actually quickly became evident that it's now the third largest nesting beach for leatherbacks in the Caribbean. So there's Matura Beach in Trinidad, which everybody knows about. There's a beach in St. Croix in the Virgin Islands, and there's Grenada that clocks in anywhere from 700 to 1,000 nests a year on a really, really small beach. So I worked on that project for a number of years, and that photo is probably with an really old camera, but this is where like access and being in the right place at the right time kind of makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, they're amazing. I worked on a turtle beach for a while, but I never got to see leatherbacks. We were mostly olive ridleys, and then we would get the odd blue or green turtle coming through. And it's such a cool experience to watch them laying their nests in the middle of the night and like listen to them breathing.
Yeah. There's something so unnatural for an ocean, marine turtle to go like, yep, I'm going to schlep up on land and dig a hole and also like to create an egg chamber that's done with the rare flippers without the benefit of sight, and that is done with such dexterity and such precision.
To watch their flippers like scooping the sand and throwing the sand, and then they use their bodies to like pat it down, and sometimes they'll even make decoy nests to confuse the predators. Just so intelligent.
So this leatherback here is actually in the process of camouflaging, which is just throwing sand around to kind of like hide the nest. And the person that's sitting there was one of our local research supervisors that worked on the project with us. So, and this is luck, because the morning turtle was kind of the holy grail of the work, because they usually come up at night. But if you're lucky enough, there's one that comes up at 4:30 in the morning, and they're still finishing up at sunrise.
Very cool.
Yeah. So that for me, that was a fundamental part of my early experience in marine science and marine conservation, and sort of understanding how the world worked, not just from science, but also from conservation, that the ideas that we learn maybe in a biology class or in a conservation biology class, maybe not anymore, but in the early 2000s and 90s, the concept of involving people in a meaningful way was still fairly novel, right? And I would argue in some places it might still be an issue, right? Coming across as somebody that's selling turtle eggs on the side of the street, it's easy to say, don't do that, right? But for some people, it's a difference between making a bit of money to go get something to eat. Right. So in some places it's so conservation issues are definitely like a challenge.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think we've talked about this in other episodes, like the hierarchy of human needs. Like, you need to tackle the social issues first. You need to make sure that everybody is that there's no inequality, that there's no oppression, that everybody can have the ability to care about the environment, And I think that's one of the biggest issues that face our humanity.
And I think also that our relationship with the natural world is also a very cultural thing, right? If you grow up in a society where you go out and fish for food and you harvest what to some people is a very majestic creature, and to somebody else it's food, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to it's you can't just sit there and judge, right? There's always another side of the story. So those are lessons I learned fairly early on in my work in marine conservation.
Yeah, and definitely in developing countries is even more difficult, because people don't, like, coastal areas are not rich people living there. So what you say is really like a challenge to change people's perspective about conservation. Somehow they are understanding very slowly, but they know that even though they need the resource, if they don't use it properly, the resource is going to disappear. So many of them have learned that lesson, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and like if you take a species like the leatherback here, it's the issue isn't just the poaching on beaches, right? It's easy to blame a local person for going out and getting some eggs, but there are entire fisheries, longlining fleets, or coastal development, where people with a lot more privilege and a lot more opportunity to correct things, so there's usually more than one piece of the puzzle.
That's so true. Yeah, entanglements are a huge issue, and also plastic bags and plastic litter in the ocean, and turtles thinking that that's their jellyfish food and ingesting them, and then causing internal issues. Yeah,
it's a very real thing. I can keep sharing some photos if you like.
Sure, yeah, if you've got some more.
I've got a few.
We love to see pictures.
Okay, there we go. Um,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So one of the things I kind of had organized these photos a little bit about around some of the questions you had asked me. So diving has been a huge part of my life, and obviously I didn't take these photos because I'm in them. So some of the experiences that I've had is, diving is a real privilege. The ability to just go in the water, and I mean that in its most fundamental sense, right? To have access to the ocean, like physically, to have enough to get to have the time opportunity to go, but also to have just even the most basic equipment, right?
Yeah.
Is so that I've been extremely privileged and fortunate to sort of experience all the things I have on the water, and I'm probably unusual in for a lot of divers. They either pick one thing. So everybody knows scuba, where you put a tank on your back and you breathe air. And I've sort of always been interested in sort of everything that has to do with diving, right? So I've gone the freediving side, where being underwater on a single breath of air allows you to interact with animals. So the lower photo is I had the opportunity by complete chance to end up in the Bahamas to freedive with tiger sharks.
Ooh, wow.
And if there's a moment that's gonna put you in your place in the world, it's coming face to face with a 17-foot tiger shark. And they're harmless. They're not. I didn't feel threatened at any point in time, but it does like give you an appreciation for where you belong in the food chain, right? In the world. And then the other sense, I've always been interested in sort of the technical side, the theory of diving, and how far you could push those boundaries. So I've also been diving rebreathers, where you sort of rebreathe the air through a constant loop, and the machine basically takes out the CO2, scrubs out the CO2 that you exhale, and then replaces the oxygen that you've metabolized by just injecting a little bit of oxygen. And what that does, you basically are able to spend a lot of time underwater without blowing bubbles. So you get to experience your interactions with animals in a completely different way. And when I did the course, I actually did it where I grew up. Years later, that equipment and the training became available on the island. So having spent my entire time diving all these dive sites, I then went back, over time and dove those dive sites in a rebreather, and they looked so different because there was a different fish you could approach. Big schools of horse-eyed jacks would come around you. Turtles weren't swimming away from you. I once spent like 15 minutes on the seagrass within about 6 inches of a flounder. Had a staring contest for about 15 minutes because you're not exhaling bubbles. They don't run away.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That is so cool. Oh my gosh. I'd love to try that.
Yeah. So it will definitely sort of like, open up a whole new world, literally. So for me, I sort of, from a diving side of thing, I kind of, those are the two ends of a spectrum, if you will. Yeah.
Very cool.
Then, so the thing about freediving, that it's something I discovered when I was really young, and I'll just preface this: if you want to learn about freediving, do a course. And I'm not saying that as a biased instructor, but I had a couple of accidents when I was fairly young, fairly inexperienced, and not the sort of thing that most people walk away from. And then years later, I managed to do a course, and I'd always been interested in competing. Has anybody here seen the Big Blue by Luc Besson?
No, but I think someone else recommended this to
Yeah, Carlos.
Carlos did.
So
Yeah.
any freediver in the world will mention the Big Blue. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a beautiful story about a rivalry between two elite freedivers that were breaking records. So in the 80s era of freediving, and it's obviously a little bit romanticized of a story, but anybody has seen that then sort of gets the bug to try competition. And in recent years, pre-COVID, it's become like a huge part of my life to train and sort of go to a competition. It's basically the objective is you announce a target depth, and then you try to aim for that. And then if you meet the objective of getting to the bottom and coming back up to the top, then you sort of get a white card and you get points on the scoreboard over the space of a week. But I rediscovered freediving at a time in my life that was extremely challenging, having gone through a number of personal traumas in fairly short order, including loss of my dad about 10 years ago. Depression was sort of a very real thing. Mental health was a real challenge, and sort of struggled back and forth on a lot of things. What am I doing? What career path do I want to take? And when you struggle for mental health, it's almost difficult to commit to something long term. So holding down a job can be really difficult. And I sort of went through all that, and then I rediscovered freediving by chance, and I sort of stayed away from a bit because of the accidents that I'd had. And then it rekindled my interest, and I returned. I decided to sort of, I'll train for this, and I actually stopped going to therapy, like sort of counseling, and decided to use freediving as an actual sort of mechanism for my own healing. And you have to be disciplined. You have to train for it. You don't just get magically to depth. Like any, you have to treat it like a sport. So I had to train. You have to develop a sense of consciousness about your ability to sort of let go in the water. So meditation and sort of breathing techniques and yoga and all of that became quite important. So I went to my first competition in I believe is 2017, and I didn't know what I was doing. And so here I'm competing in a discipline called no fins, where you descend without fins, and then there's a point in the dive, usually around 25, 30 meters, where you become negatively buoyant, and then you just free fall. And Dan Verhoeven, the Dutch photographer, is really great at capturing these things, as you can see here. So it's just me sort of free falling into the depth. But you really have to get a point in your head where you're comfortable with that, where you're really letting go. Sure, you can grab the line at any time and come up, but if you're trying to accomplish that aim, it's sort of, that's what you're trying to do. The no fins dive wasn't the first dive that I did, but it was another dive that I had set my mind on. And this is the photo that Dan took shortly after I came up, and it was given a white card, and it was sort of a culmination of all the things I had put in towards that healing and towards that journey, and trying to overcome. There's a point where you can get into your life where you're not sure whether you can even accomplish anything anymore, and for me that was sort of a turning point, and it was kind of interesting to see that captured on camera as well. So freediving has been a massive part of my life. I'm hoping that competitions resume one day, but for now it's also a way to spend time in the ocean. No.
Nice.
No.
Oh, cute.
Back to turtles. So I mean, I think I've talked quite a bit, but there's a couple of more photos here. So this is the opposite of what you saw in the first slide. It's a giant, the hatchling of a giant leatherback, and it's a start of a journey of survival, right? That this turtle has to take, and we still don't know a lot about the biology of turtles. If anybody's interested in leatherbacks, there's a wonderful book by Carl Safina called The Voyage of the Leatherback. The Voyage of the Turtle, I think it's called, and that book really describes the world of leatherbacks in a really fascinating way, all the way from hatchlings to adulthood. But this is kind of what it looks like after you come out of the nest and you fought your way down the beach.
Wow.
And
that's a cool shot.
Wow, that's nice.
Yeah, this is a long exposure taken at night. So the turtle is a little blurry here, but you can see the mouse. Yeah, and then this is one of my friends here, who's the current research supervisor of the organization, Ocean Spirits, and so she's checking for tags or counting eggs and making sure that the turtle is going to lay successfully. There's a moment when the turtle's laying where you have a lot of leeway in terms of how you can approach them. But this is sort of, a lot of this work happens in the dark, right? At night on the remote beach, often in the rain with mosquitoes, right?
Yeah. And sand fleas biting your ankles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So one of the, it's funny you mentioned that. One of the policies we had on the project is that because we would use a gloved hand and place it under the cloaca and let the eggs drop in your hand, and then we would drop them into the nest so we can count them. So one of the policies was that you weren't allowed to wear bug spray.
Right. Yeah.
Right, which has consequences.
Yeah, we didn't. I don't know if it wasn't allowed, but we didn't wear bug spray either when I was working on the turtle beaches. And when I came home after 3 months of doing that work, my legs were just disgusting. The sand fleas and the mosquitoes, it was.
Where did you say that was again?
Sorry?
Where did you say your turtle work was?
In Costa Rica, on the Pacific coast. I worked. They've changed their name a couple times. They were previously Pritoma, and then the turtle projects got their own name, Turtle Tracks, and now Pritoma is Crema Costa Rica. And I'm not sure if Turtle Tracks is still its own thing or if it's been absorbed into Crema Costa Rica. But I worked on the turtle beaches for that organization in a small town called Corozalito.
Okay.
And it's like maybe 300 people. And we lived in the community and worked at night with the turtles. And it was a pretty amazing experience.
It kind of almost speaks in a way that, those wild places are where few people live, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was probably one of the first times that I got to experience living in a small town in very natural and a very sustainable way, where we lived very simply, and just being on the ocean every day. And then coming back to Canada, I came back in the dead of winter, and it was just a culture shock, or I guess just like it felt very strange coming back to the Western world and excess around Christmas time.
No, for sure. It's definitely a juxtaposition.
Yeah.
I don't know what the next photo is. Oh, it's another turtle photo. I seem to have a theme. For me, so this photo, it's again, I actually think it's the same turtle that we had in the first slide. For me, this photo kind of represents sort of that human connection to the work. The project that I was involved with at the time and still does today. And actually Kester here on the right hand side near the head of the turtle, he's still involved with the project up to this day. So he's probably been at it for at least 10, almost 15 years, I would say. But it's also that, that we had made a conscious effort to sort of engage, the very local community that had sort of relied on these turtles for food in the past, right? And then other than involving them in research, there was a significant push to get them towards turtle watching, which is obviously the classic model around turtles to try to get to a sustainable model.
Cool.
So we had a really interesting event here in Halifax recently. We had a blue whale wash up on Thursday at some point on Thursday, I think. And just by chance, I found out about it like first thing Friday morning, and I ventured out on Friday and had a look, and it was full of people. The water was super foggy, and the waves were really it was high tide, and the carcass of this animal was just sort of like being rolled around to no avail. So I couldn't get any great photos of what was happening, so I went back at sunrise the next morning, and it just coincided beautifully with low tide. And I think the Marine Animal Response Society here measured this whale at around 25 meters.
Wow,
which is like 80 something feet. Have
they figured out the cause of death yet?
As far as I know, they don't, and I think from what I've read, they don't expect to, because I'm not sure they were able to sort of. I don't want to speak for Mars, but from what I've read, is they were suspecting they may not get to an autopsy because of where it is and the risk of cutting open an animal in the conditions on slippery rocks and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
but it had been found, I think, by the Coast Guard off the coast, and it didn't have any sort of like obvious signs of being entangled or sort of or hit by a vessel, or that's, you know, no external evidence, I guess would be the way to say it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's quite a sight. It's, you know, largest animal around, and
Yeah, that's incredible.
And how, like, the, you know, just even in, like, I mean, we had a storm, we also had a hurricane go past on its way to Newfoundland, so the surge was quite high, but just, you know, just to see, like, you know, maybe 5-foot seas just toss a, you know, an animal that large around, like, just shows how powerful the ocean is.
Right. Yeah.
So but what's really interesting is a lot of people came out. It's down at Crystal Crescent Beach, popular beach park, you know, about 25 minutes from the city, and there were streams of people going to see
I bet. I mean, that's a pretty rare animal to spot in the ocean alive. Yeah. So this is probably, I mean, I've never seen one.
Is that a humpback?
It's a blue whale.
It's a blue one. I can see very well.
Yeah, it's even here, like 2-3 days in, I think it washed up dead. So pretty decomposed as it was. But the amount of people that got to see it was impressive. In fact, like I shot this probably I probably shot this, you know, not long before the sun came up, and I actually expected more people to be there at sunrise trying to get some photos, and I was really shocked that I was the only one. But not long after the sun came up, there were people starting to stream in, and by the time I got back to the parking lot, you know, there were probably like 30-40 cars. Yeah. So I think it was an opportunity for people to sort of interact with an animal that they otherwise wouldn't see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The largest animal on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Largest.
It's endangered, like a lot of the big whales are, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's, I guess for listeners who don't know what MARS is, anybody who lives on the eastern coast of Canada, it's the Marine Animal Response Society, and they take calls for animals that have been stranded or are injured or in otherwise need of help. Or dead animals where they go to try to figure out why they have died, whether it was a ship strike or an entanglement. And then animals that are in need of help, MARS tries to get them back out to sea. And so, Nick, you are a volunteer, or you're in the process of becoming a volunteer. Yep. I am also in the process of becoming a volunteer, but I live in Montreal, and so I'm not sure how often I'll get a call.
I definitely just want to be clear. I wasn't there sort of in an official capacity. I kind of went as an interested sort of person of interest, but also, you know, an opportunity to sort of document something that you know, like the fact that I managed to get there at sunrise, at low tide, and nobody there, you know, that's just a combination of that's a pretty unique set of circumstances. You know, it could have been high tide at sunrise, right? And it could have been foggy again, right? The day before, you can see 200 feet in front of you. So,
so true. And you never know. Yeah.
And it was not funny, but I showed up there at, you know, just before 5 a.m, and it was pitch dark, and I had a little headlamp that obviously only goes so far, and I went to the same spot the whale had been the day before, and I couldn't see anything. And then I saw a piece of bone, and I saw another piece of bone, and a bunch of chunks of baleen had come off the whale, and I couldn't see the whale. And it was low tide, and I was like, oh, maybe it got washed out. But then I kept seeing more bone, and I kept thinking, I just told myself, this didn't disintegrate overnight. There's no way a creature this size would just fall apart. But I was really starting to doubt myself in the dark that I wouldn't see this whale. And then sure enough, it was probably like another 100 feet further down the shoreline. And what had happened is the jaw the bottom part of the mouth had sort of broken off.
Yeah, probably because of the waves.
Yeah. But for a moment I thought, okay, this thing is just this 80-foot whale just disintegrated overnight.
Right, yeah.
So, but no, there it was. And
and that's a great shot. You did a really good job with that one.
Yeah, it was difficult to photograph just to get a. It was fairly decomposed, and the nice black under the body had sort of peeled away. That's sort of like on this side here, on the bottom of the mouth here, and it was kind of hard to get a photo where it's more of a blob in the front. So the tail at this point, and maybe the fin here on the right, is probably the only thing that kind of still gives it some semblance of shape. The front was sort of kind of like flat, and it was, I'm not going to get into details, but it was pretty smelly.
Poor thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's such an amazing creature to have washed up, and even at the end, given an opportunity for people to sort of connect with something that they normally wouldn't.
Yeah.
True. I met a friend of mine. His wife was walking down with her 3 kids, and they're homeschooled, and she goes, "Yeah, we heard about the whale, and so today's field trip day." So she trekked her 3 kids down to see the whale, and that was their Friday afternoon of education, their field trip.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be nice if all of our schools did stuff like that?
I think the liability concerns that people would have would probably.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
But that's the thing, right? It's like you wouldn't have that opportunity necessarily. No. Yeah.
Oh well, is that it for photos? Oh, this is cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, this is a brown booby that I took in Dominica just after the competition. And the really short story behind this is it had been floating in the water about 40, 50 feet from the dive platform that people were starting to wrap up on the last day of the competition. So taking all the equipment off, and there was a boat, usually a swim back to shore at the platform. It's about a 10-minute swim. But we'd been there all day, and I didn't really want to miss the boat because it was packing up all the gear. So I was actually in the boat, and this brown booby had been floating in the water like that for about 10 minutes. And there's moments where you doubt yourself, and you go like, "There's no way I can get close to this thing, right? Like, there's no way it's gonna let me get close." And I got on the boat, and I was like 1 foot, and I still had my fins on, and 1 foot was over the side of the boat. And somebody says, "Nick, do you want your camera?" And that was all the impetus I needed. So I got back in the water and swam towards it and fired off a bunch of shots, and it didn't move. It was like super interested. And it was just like this moment that for about 10 minutes, and actually everybody waited for me. I didn't miss the boat, but it's been about 10, 15 minutes swimming with it and taking some photos.
And was it curious of you?
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So if you ever have a camera in your hand, and obviously always sort of respect animals and their distances, right? Without harassing them, but animals are curious too, right? They'll investigate. So that was just a moment of, and the way I sort of approached it was I held the camera in front of me, and as soon as I was close enough to take some photos, I was just starting to shoot. But you can also, when you're freediving, the nice thing about it, you have no gear, right? So you're really quiet, you're really just floating. So I just kind of propelled myself with a bit of a kick, and I just let myself float with it. I try not to move or any sudden movements. And then, it was just the 2 of us floating there.
That's really cool. I always thought of birds as being super skittish. I never would have thought of a bird being curious and calm,
Oh, I think this is highly unusual. Like, and this is why I said, like, I was, we were a distance away from it. I'd been in the water for a while, but I was like, there's no way it's going to stay there, right? That's why at first I didn't want to try it. And so take the opportunity when you have it.
Yeah. That's very cool.
Wow.
And this is a lion's mane jellyfish. This is here in Nova Scotia. Again, one of those days where it's just like, I didn't, there's days where like, it's a bit of an effort to get in the water or go get a boat, find a boat to take you somewhere. And I'd been in the water quite a bit that week, and I was like physically exhausted, but I had managed to get in the water, and just the light just kind of like lined up nicely. This is only in like 10 feet of water.
Wow. That's amazing. I didn't know that we had lion's mane jellyfish in Nova Scotia.
Oh yeah. You get lots of them. Yeah. And they're also leatherback food too, so that ties in nicely to our story. Yeah. And leatherbacks come up here, right? They're one of the few species that can come all the way up here. So this is the nice thing about shooting. Also, when you're freediving, you tend not to shoot with strobes, because the arms of the strobes and the housing make it really complicated to swim around with and bulky. So, and also because you're in the shallows a lot, shooting with ambient light, you have to be a little bit more creative because you can't light things up artificially, but you can play with the light. And in the shallows, you have a lot of if it's a sunny day, even, I mean, the waters here in Canada are, compared to the Caribbean, are really tough to shoot in because it can be, pretty dark. In the spring, you have these plankton blooms. But yeah, even here you can find opportunities to, and you can kind of see the water still has a lot of particles in it, which kind of, at least from my perspective, gets in the way.
Yeah, definitely. And depends on where you go too.
Yeah. And this isn't the best shot that I've taken, but I recently had the opportunity to follow some people that were surveying eelgrass beds at Owl's Head, which, if anybody doesn't know, in Nova Scotia here has become quite a contentious issue because it's been proposed as a development for a golf course, and I think a lot of the issue stems around it's sort of, the way I understand the story is that it was potentially listed to be a provincial park and then sort of delisted very quietly in favor of development. So I had an opportunity to follow some people that were trying to do some surveys, and this is sort of a drone bird's eye view photo of the eelgrass, and that eelgrass is about 6 feet deep.
Oh wow, that's incredible.
It's like a field, and you almost can't see the water bare for a few ripples here, and it just looks like a field. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's such an important ecosystem for, particularly for spawning fish, right? So that would be a shame. I think I signed the petition to not make it a golf course. Yeah.
But yeah, and it's also like, vital for shorelines. But yeah, it's such an amazing system that like you have these fields of grass on the water. It's and literally, for somebody who has never been in the ocean, like, just think of running through a field of really tall grass, except you're swimming through it, and it looks different, but it's the same sort of feel, right?
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. So that's just another way to sort of, try to tell the story and sort of, I really enjoyed viewing that from that angle as opposed to smoking through it. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a shot like this of eelgrass.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, they're really important for preventing coastal erosion, right? Because the power of the water gets slowed by these fields of grass. Really, really important.
Yeah, they hold the sediment together and nutrient. They contribute hugely to nutrient cycles.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this will also die off you get into the winter months, right? You'll have less light, more wave action, so it'll fall back, and all that sort of will also be, all that detritus basically is feeding into the ecosystem as well. And in the tropics, where you have things like turtles, other than providing habitat, they're a huge food source for a lot of animals too.
Yep. Yeah.
So yeah, these are just some photos that I've taken over the years.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing them with us.
Yeah, they're really beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And for our viewers, if you want to check out Nicolas's photography some more, head to his website. It's in the banner here. And
Instagram is probably also a good place. It's just my name, photography. I probably keep it more up to date than my website.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I guess with that, we can kind of round off our talk with our final question, which is, what would you like to tell our listeners and the rest of the world, anyone who might be listening, what would you like to tell them about the ocean?
That you should try to discover them yourself. That there's no amount of documentary or reading that is going to be comparable to the experience of being in the ocean, and I mean immersed, whether you're snorkeling or freediving or a scuba diver or otherwise. Just there's just nothing that compares to seeing it with your own eyes. And you know, and I think we build, I think anybody that's been in the ocean or been around the ocean and understands what it means to try to protect the oceans, I think gets that sense from having being in it. At least that's true for me. And I think if we want to sort of be able to sort of get more people to care about the oceans, I think having an opportunity to experience it, and I know I speak from a position of privilege that it's not true for everyone, that access is an issue, and those are obviously concerns that also need addressing, so that people can go and enjoy the oceans. Coastal access here in this part of the world in Nova Scotia is a massive issue, right? Like whether you have the means or not, like just being able to physically access the ocean where you want isn't always possible because a lot of it is held privately. So, you know,
and you need a car to access the ocean in a lot of instances because the public transport won't necessarily take you there.
Most definitely. Yeah. So, you know, if you ever have the opportunity to see the ocean yourself, take it.
Yeah. I love that. It's a great message. Well, thank you so much for joining us today for our My Ocean story. Thank you so much for being here with us, Nick. It was a pleasure to have you. And
thank you.
Thanks. So we'll say goodbye for now and welcome you to join our next My Ocean story, number 8, which we'll be posting about within the coming weeks. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye.
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 Thanks for having me.